I wanted a home birth to start with. And he was like, I don't want a home birth. That does not seem safe. I don't want him to be like so shocked and taken out of the moment because he's like not sure what his brain is seeing while I'm laboring. I want your undivided attention. And that's not ridiculous for you to ask for. Like the least you can do is not be on your phone. We've hired a team that has my best interest at heart. Words. He was uncertain until he got educated. I'm gonna film this super quick because my kiddo is upstairs asleep. And if you're a parent, you know I have a very short window to get this done in a quiet-ish fashion. So, hey guys, I'm Ilea. I had a home birth almost 20 months ago, and I posted that video on YouTube. Last I checked, it was like over 1 million views, which is such a blessing because I've never had a video with so many positive comments, honestly. You know, you would think with a home birth, because usually people are pretty anti-home birth because it's not safe. I was kind of expecting a lot of negative comments, but a lot of the comments were, thank you so much for this. Like, it's so nice to see a natural physiologic birth. Oh my gosh, your husband is so great. And that's where this video idea comes from. My husband caught my daughter as I delivered her and brought her up to my chest. And it was such a beautiful moment. And so many of the comments were like, how did you get him to get in the water with you? How did you get him to be so attentive? How? And to start with, my husband is incredible. He is a very compassionate, loving man and isn't afraid to show that he has compassion and empathy. But he's also very masculine, very manly. Those two things can coexist. He's a very manly man, but he also is not afraid to show his compassionate, empathetic side. So that all being said, I need to rewind just a little bit to get some preface of how I prepared my husband. Because even though he does have those natural qualities of compassion and love and empathy, this is new territory. This is the love of his life, being in the most pain of her life. And I've talked to him at lengths about this since, and so I've got some notes from him as well. So if you're a husband watching this and you're trying to figure out how you can best support your wife, this is a great video for you. If you're a pregnant mom and you're like, I need to set my husband up for success before we go into like potentially one of the most challenging things we'll ever go through as a couple, bringing a child into the world, and you want to come out as a band of brothers, if you will, like you've been through something together and it makes you that much stronger. And that's what you want out of labor and delivery. You don't want to come out with resentment. So to back up, my husband was very cautious, obviously, because he loves me and he now loves our daughter that I was pregnant with. I wanted a home birth to start with. And he was like, I don't want a home birth. That does not seem safe. I don't feel confident in that. So we compromised and we settled on a birth center. Fast forward though to 37 weeks and we transferred to home birth, obviously. What happened in between those, like that first like 11 week appointment to 37 weeks is we got educated, like hella educated. And the beautiful thing about being a pregnant mom, and if you're watching this, you know this, that you just have this, I had this desire to just absorb every single bit of information I could about what my body was going through, what was gonna happen, and how labor and delivery could look. And so I just sunk my teeth into podcasts, YouTube videos, birth courses. I just like became a sponge and absorbed a lot of things. And I went to like wise counsel. I went to, friends that they had deliveries that I wanted something similar. So I talked to them about it. Another beautiful thing about my story, and I didn't recognize it in the moment, but in hindsight, is that I am an older mom. Like I didn't have my daughter till I was 29. So I had witnessed all of my friends, sisters, acquaintances. I've heard a lot of stories through the years of, positive birth stories and hella negative birth stories. And like I've seen the spectrum within my friends of heavy medicalized traumatic birth that thank God they were there because the doctors saved them, even though really once you learn about birth and the way hospitals do birth, you realize that, oh, you just had the cascade of interventions, like, which is something maybe I could talk about in a different video. But I realized very quickly, like, I do not want a hospital birth. Like, barring that my child is at risk or my life is at risk, like, because we don't want to make unwise decisions. Like, I'm a low risk pregnancy because I do not want to birth in the hospital because that doesn't feel free. It doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel like the right place for me. And if you know anything about birth, you need your oxytocin flowing. You need to be comfortable. You need to feel safe. So that being said, learning about birth and being comfortable with birth starts with you. You have to be confident in yourself and educate yourself so that you can guide your husband along this journey. Also, something to keep in mind is that your husband doesn't care about birth as much as you care about birth, and that's okay. My husband doesn't have that desire to research home birth, birth center, induction, hospital. He doesn't care. Like, he cares, but he doesn't care to invest like a whole bunch of time like us moms do. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. As I was learning and educating myself, sinking my teeth into podcasts, YouTube videos, birth classes, books, as I was like sinking my teeth into all these things, as I would learn something, I'd be like, this clip from like 1:30 to like 5:15 on this podcast is so informative. It's mind-changing. I want to share this with my husband, but I can't expect him to listen to every 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour podcast that I am in the middle of, and that is a pertinent piece of information. So what I would do is I would screen record. I have an iPhone. I would screen record the chunk that I wanted him to listen to, or just take note of the time, text him the link and or the screen recording, and say, hey, this is really important to me. This screen recording from this podcast is a really informative birth story, a really informative tidbit about, X, Y, and Z, and it would really mean a lot to me if you would listen to it when you have some downtime, while you're pooping on the toilet, like whatever. If you could just listen to it, I would greatly appreciate it. And he would, and that was great because you have to manage your expectations. Like, he's not going to want to listen to an hour-long podcast. Just send him the summary, screen recording, or even like type it out. I don't know. That is most informative and most helpful. Next, I also shared videos with him. So I know maybe this might not be, maybe you're not comfortable with this, but I felt like it was very important that my husband saw exactly what's going to happen, if you know what I mean. Like, I did not sugarcoat it. I did not send him just PG videos on YouTube. I was like, hey, here's a home birth video reel on Instagram. It shows the baby coming out, and the mom is roaring like a lion. I want you to see this because, for one thing, it's magical. Number two, you kind of have to like desensitize them to what's going to happen. I know it sounds strange, but I don't want the first time him seeing a baby coming out of a person's body being me. I don't want him to be like so shocked and taken out of the moment because he's like not sure what his brain is seeing. I wanted him to like, no, like, I've seen this before. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to see my daughter be born. And I wanted him to be present for it and not scared of it. So I sent him the videos, and sometimes if the YouTube videos, the birth vlogs or whatever were super long, I'd say, hey, watch it from this time to this time. And he did. And it was honestly, like, I think we've taken authority away from dads in labor and delivery. So like, think about the traditional birth, and you go into the hospital once your water breaks, which is not what you do, by the way, don't do that. But like on the movies, like your water breaks, so you go into the hospital, and then the mom gets in a gown, and then all the nurses and doctors are running around, and the dad's just in the side or holding a hand and being like, I don't know what to do. That is such a disservice to dads. And it starts them out in fatherhood where they don't have any authority over their child, and they're just like along for the ride instead of being like an active participant in this life that they created, bringing it into the world. So it's worth it. It's worth the hours of information. So I also laid everything out on the table. I'm kind of this way in general. I don't like to let things fester. I don't want to hold resentment and anxiety towards things. I'd rather just be like, hey, the way you just said that offended me, and did you mean it that way? Did you mean it to hurt my feelings? Or did you misspeak? And usually, like, we just resolve the issue right then and there instead of getting offended or harboring anxiety or being naggy. I try to bypass all of that. So I've seen lots of labors and deliveries because, for one, I've had lots of sisters and sister-in-laws who have had babies. I have done birth videography and photography, so I've seen the whole spectrum of a heavily medicalized intervention at a hospital all the way to a home birth where the kid was out in an hour. Like, I've seen the whole spectrum. Something I've witnessed along the way is that it really sucks when I am taking pictures of a client, or a client is laboring, and the dad is on the phone scrolling, playing Angry Birds, and not being attentive, not doing hip squeezes, not being an involved participant. So I told Dave all of my anxieties. This is the one time in our relationship where I'm gonna be selfish. I'm gonna be selfish and say, hey, while I'm laboring, I want your undivided attention. And that's not ridiculous for you to ask for. Like, especially if you're not a high maintenance person the rest of your life, like I'm not. And so I just want your undivided attention, however long it takes to get this baby out, because I'm doing the hardest thing of my life. The least you can do is not be on your phone. So I laid everything on the table. My anxieties of, this isn't the video that I'll go into it. I have a separate video about boundaries. in labor and delivery where like I just didn't want people waiting on me. I didn't want people in the waiting room. I didn't want to let people know when I was in labor because I didn't want Dave to have to be fielding text of like, oh yeah, she's stalled at 7, or like just had that pressure of everybody's wanting the final word. I don't know. It's just, that caused me a lot of anxiety. And so I just communicated every spectrum of like, oh, I'm afraid of the cascade of interventions, so I don't want to have a hospital birth. Like I just laid it all on the table, and we had very open discussions about that. Next, hire a doula to help guide the process. So my husband has said this. I asked him before I recorded this video, I was like, what was something that made you more comfortable? And he said, having Shannon, our doula there, and our midwife, he said, I would look at them when you would be making like the craziest sound I've ever heard you make. You'd be roaring like a lion or falling asleep. And I would look at them and they wouldn't be worried. Their faces would be just like, yep, this is what's happening. And he would occasionally look at them and be like, is this okay? And they'd be like, yep, this is totally normal. And he said, having other women there who have seen this hundreds of times brought him so much peace and comfort that he could relax and just be present with me, and knowing that everything that was happening was normal, and that he shouldn't be afraid, and that his wife is capable, and that we've hired a team that has my best interest at heart. Words. We also took a birth class together. We took a digital birth class. I'm gonna have to find a different one to recommend because unfortunately it was a very, very great birth class, but I do not recommend it anymore because the creator is pro-abortion and pro you killing your children. So I don't recommend that course anymore. So I will try to find a different one to link. But I took a hypnobirthing course and we did it together. We would sit and watch it together. And it explained how contractions work, what they are, oxytocin, how the body works, how the baby does the turn, like a very educational birth class. And it taught him what was actually happening instead of it just being like this mystery. We both got educated together, and that was really awesome. We worked out a birth plan. We worked out scenario A, B, and C. And also we did that with our doula. We told her like, hey, this is the priority, barring that something wonky doesn't happen. Like this is our second priority. This is our third priority. And like we communicated all of that with our doula, and I communicated all of that with my husband. And then we all talked about it together. And with the idea of that, like if I'm not mentally coherent in that moment, which was an accurate representation. I did not think I would not be mentally coherent, but I felt like I was in another hazy world, like Narnia or something. Just in case, like I wanted them to know what my priorities were, what I would accept and what I would stand for and what I would not. So educating the two people who would represent me was super important. He also communicated his vision. So once he started getting educated about birth, he was like, I would really love to catch the baby. And actually I had a little bit of doubt. I was like, I don't think he's actually gonna wanna catch the baby. And he was like, he was in there. I don't know if y'all saw it, but like he was ready for the baby. He was not afraid of it at all. So I asked my husband what made him comfortable, and this is what he said. He said, I normalized it and conditioned him. I showed him real content that showed blood, guts, tearing. Like, I know it sounds weird, and it does, like, but in the birth sense, like, it's not a sexual thing. Like, I showed him real women, like, giving birth in the tub, in their backyard, and all the way from, like, a hospital delivery on their back. And I would add commentary of why that is an evidence-based way of delivering. He was uncertain until he got educated. So once we got to 37 weeks, and we have both radically been educating ourselves and lots of conditioning and just kind of like living in this like, okay, birth, delivery world, because like that really is the foundation of how your postpartum is going to go. I know maybe that's an unpopular opinion. People are like, oh, you know, an alive mom and baby is all that matters. If that's the bar, I don't want it, because how your baby comes into this world affects their breastfeeding, affects your bonding, affects your hormones postpartum. Like if you feel like you were taken advantage of and you were just ramrodded through like an assembly line of giving birth, like it's gonna affect your postpartum. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, but that is my opinion, that I wanted to not be traumatized by the end of it. And I wanted Dave to not be traumatized by the end of it. So when we got to 37 weeks, the birth center had a very hard 42-week cutoff. And I was like, I'm a first-time mom. Statistically, I'm going to go over. And I was like, I just have a feeling my guest date is off because I could never get them to quite align with it, even though I had, you know, my ovulation date, I had implantation bleeding. I knew the night we conceived. Like I knew. Okay. And I couldn't get them to quite align on my guest date because that's what it is. It's a guess. We don't know. Honestly, the whole 40-week thing is a scam. I can do another video about that later. But if you're watching this and your doctor is saying, oh, we need to induce you at 37, 38, 39, 40 weeks, I'm not telling you what to do, but do some research on it. So they had a hard cutoff and I was like, I I feel it in my bones, Dave. Like I feel it in my soul that I am not supposed to give birth there because there's going to be a hard cutoff. And if there's a hard cutoff, then they're going to transfer me to the hospital. And I was like, and I'm not giving birth in the hospital. And I know lots of people might get mad at that, and that's fine. It's my birth. I can do what I want. It's like, I'm not giving birth in the hospital. So at 37 weeks, I reached out to my doula and I said, hey, any home birth midwives you recommend? I just want to see if they're available and if we can go from there. Because she also said, you know, with giving birth at a birth center, it's a great resource for sure. It is an amazing resource. They do an incredible job. However, you are just paying to give birth at someone else's home. You're laboring at home. You have to get in the car. For me, it was a 50-minute drive. You have to drive 50 minutes for me to then go to their birthing suite, which is a great, beautiful thing. It's a wonderful resource. They have a huge tub. They have a bathroom. They have a bed. But like, it's just a room that it could be the same at home. Like the home birth midwives are just as skilled as the midwives that are employed by the birth center. So I was like, you know what, Dave, I love you. You are the love of my life. I was like, I kind of have to pull a veto a little bit. And he was like, you know what, but I'm on board this time. Like in the beginning, I didn't know much and I was very uneducated. Now I know that if you leave birth unmessed with, it works most of the time. He's like, you are a low risk mom. You are very educated. He's like, I trust in your ability, which turn on, guys. Like, just like to tell your wife that you just trust in her ability as a woman to give birth, like, there you go. I've done the research of the cascade of interventions, what it would look like at a birth center, and you're right, you're just paying to give birth at someone else's home. He's like, so let's move it to home. And he's learned the anatomy of what happens, the oxytocin, all the things. And he was like, this will set us up for a beautiful postpartum experience because it's a family event. And so that is how I prepared my husband for labor and delivery. And if you want to send this to your husband, that's great. If you want to just take the tips I've shared and run with it, go for it. Because I think we're doing a disservice to our husbands if we don't educate them and they live in fear of what's going to happen. Because as much as we like to say, like, oh, like as long as the baby is out, as long as mom and baby are okay, like that's all that matters. It's not all that matters. I know so many fathers who are traumatized by their wife's labor and delivery because it did not go to plan because of the cascade of interventions, and they're traumatized, their wife's traumatized, and the baby's traumatized. That is no way to start a postpartum experience. And if we take away that authority of the father and of him being an active participant, not just a man in the waiting room with cigars, of education and confidence within his wife who's giving birth, like what a masculine thing to do. It is not wimpy for him to, cry at his child's birth or to look at it and not be like, look at your baby being delivered and be like, oh, that's gross. Like, dude, it was so gross. Like, honestly, the most masculine thing a man can do is be there and support his wife giving birth to their child and not fearing it, not letting his ego get in the way, letting his wife be the feminine powerhouses that we are. Because honestly, that's a effing superpower that we have as women. Like, to give birth, we are freaking rock stars. I don't care who knows it because we have this capability of bringing human life into this world. And husbands should be excited about that and empowered with more knowledge. So I hope this video helped you guys. Let me know if there's any other video requests that you have, because I now have an older kiddo and it's much easier to film YouTube videos during her nap time. So hope you guys have a great day. See you later.